All right, welcome back. Hopefully you survived either reading the rules.js file or watching that marathon of a video where we went over how it works. Now that we understand it, we can add in the missing rules. So we've been over this a couple times. The full house and small straight rules currently are not written, and this happens if I try and use them. Let's see, 1, 2, 3. Will I get a 4? Okay, so technically I do have a a large straight, but if I just score it with 1, 2, 3, 4 or 2, 3, 4, 5, that should qualify as a small straight. Nope, we get an error. And the same thing happens if I refresh, and this time I try and do a full house, even if I don't actually have one. Everything breaks. And the error is that rule function, rule fn, is not a function, and that's inside of doScore. Remember how this all works over here in the game component. We have scores in state, and we're passing down this method doScores to score table, and then it in turn passes it down to rule row. But along the way, it is passing through an argument, the rule function to call from the rules.js file so that it can be evaluated. And so we pass that in here, and then when we click on the rule row, it's supposed to call doScores, passing in that argument. But right now, there is no defined function for those two rules that we just talked about. This one has to do with full house. The other one was for, small straight. And then we get an error in the game component on this line. Where are you? doScore. Right here, it tries to call rule function, but nothing is passed in, and so it's trying to call a non-existent function, which is problematic. And that all has to do with the fact that in our rules.js file, we have these consts, these two variables, full house and small straight. They exist, and we're exporting them, and we're using them actually inside of score table. If we look, we're importing small straight and full house, and then down here, we're using them, full house.evalRole, small straight.evalRole, but those don't exist. So we're basically passing in nothing. Okay, so in rules.js, we need to fix full house and small straight. Let's start with full house. So a full house is when you have 3 of one number and 2 of another. So like 3 3s and 2 5s, 3 6s and 2 1s. We'll go and define a class. Let's do it right here. It's actually partially defined. Class full house, but it's not actually using the base rule class we've been using. So I'm going to extend rule because we want to take advantage of the freak method, the frequency method. And the reason for that is that it makes it nice and easy to tell if something is a full house, because we can check, are there 3 of one thing and 2 of another thing? If you remember, we pass in, an array that looks like 1, 2, 2, 2, 1. What we would get back is an array that says there's a frequency of 2 things and then a frequency of 3 things. The order doesn't matter. We don't have to care 3 of what, 2 of what. It doesn't matter. We just want to know there was 3 of a kind and 2 of a kind. So we can use this frequency method, but to take advantage of it, we need to extend. So extends rule, that base class, the abstract class. And then we need to define evalRole because that's the pattern all of these have been following. Single parameter dice, and dice will be an array. For example, let's just go with the one we just were working with, something like that. So that's what dice could look like. And let's call the freak, so this dot freak of dice, and let's save it to a variable. Let's call it freak, or how about freaks? There we go. So now we should have an array in there that would look like, in this case, 2 of something, 3 of something else. The order could be switched. It could be like that. It doesn't matter. So then next, what we're going to do is return, and we just want to figure out if freaks contains 2 and it contains 3. So we can do that pretty easily. Freaks dot includes 2, and then afterwards, and freaks dot includes 3. So the order doesn't matter there. We just want to make sure they're both there. And then over here, we'll check what is the score that we're supposed to return in the case of a full house. 25 points. So it doesn't matter what the values are. It's either 25 points for a full house, and if you don't have a full house, 0 points. So over here, let's return and make this a ternary operator. So I'm going to add a question mark. We'll return 25 or 0. So we're getting the frequencies of those dice that are passed in here, or not actually passed in here, but they look like this. And then we're checking does the frequency result contain 2 and 3? And if it does, then return 25, otherwise return 0. So then down here, we need to make sure that we're using our full house class. And so that's going to be new full house. And right now we're just returning 25 every time. But if you notice the pattern we're following with all the other ones, we actually pass in score. Score here, score there. We could hard code it as 25, or we can do it this way where we say score is 25. And then inside of the class, we change this to be this dot score. All right, so now everything should be working for full house. Let's test it out, refresh the page over here. All the other infrastructure is in place. Let's just make sure we can click full house and we don't get an error. Okay, so we're getting 0. Now, how long is it going to take for me to actually get a full house? Okay, I've been here rolling and refreshing for like 20 times in a row, but I finally got a full house. Let's test it. And we get 25 points. That's how it's supposed to work. All right, so next we need to work on small straight. So right here, we have it defined to be a string. We have the empty class up top. How do we tell if something is a small straight? Well, there's a couple things we're looking for. It's 4 numbers in a row. So that could be 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is define eval roll. That's what all of them have been using. Dice. Just keep the name the same. And then in here, the first thing I'm going to do is turn it into a set. So make a set, let's call it D for dice, equals new set from dice. And the reason I'm doing that is that it makes it easier for me to search, or well, not search, but check if a given value is present. So I can say things like d.has 1 and d.has 2, and I could keep going like that. Okay, so instead of making you watch me type all of this, here's at least one solution to this. It's not necessarily the most beautiful or elegant thing ever, but we're checking based off of 2 sort of versions. So the straight can be 2, 3, and 4 plus 1, so 1, 2, 3, 4, or it could be 2, 3, 4 plus 5. So if the set has 2 and 3 and 4, and it either has 1 or 5, then in that case, we would return small straight 30 points. So return 30, but I'm going to do this dot score. So we'd pass the score in. And then the same thing down here, we're checking 3, 4, and 5. So if it has 3, 4, and 5, and it either has 2 or 6, that's another condition where you have a small straight. Otherwise, at the very end, let's return 0. So that means there is no straight. Okay, so I'm going to come down here and make sure that I'm calling new small straight, and then passing in score, which is supposed to be 30. And then we're using this dot score right here and there. So if we give it a go over here, let's see. Oh, perfect. 3, 4, 5, 6. That's a small straight. There's going to be a small issue, which is kind of hard to pick up on, but you can see there's no value assigned. And this has to do with how I just wrote the code. What's happening is that this dot score is not actually it doesn't exist. It's not defined. We don't have access to it. We are passing it in here, this object. The problem is that I don't have a constructor. None of my classes have constructors, except for the fact that they extend the base abstract rule class, which has a constructor right here. And we're calling object at assign with the params that are passed in so that we have all those properties available. But I did not take advantage of that when I was defining small straight like I did for full house. So we need to extend rule. Now we'll see if my luck continues. Do I get another one? Okay, 3, 4, 6. Let's get a 5, please. Okay, 3, 4, 5, 6. Small straight. We get 30 points. Let's try it again with one that is definitely not a small straight, like this one. We get 0. Okay, so now we've got full house and small straight working. That was definitely the biggest obstacle, the hardest part, because we had to write some logic. We weren't just, adding click events and passing props and state and doing sort of standard cookie cutter React stuff. This is where we get into some dicier stuff. That was a bad pun. Okay, next up, we've got yet another part.